Welcome to Cultivate, a Veritas Academy podcast, where we explore truth, beauty, and goodness through meaningful conversation. We invite you to join us in discussions meant to edify your mind, encourage your heart, and equip your family to live abundantly in Christ.
Welcome back to Cultivate, everyone. And today I have a special privilege and honor to thank our season sponsor. Yes, we have a season sponsor for Cultivate. And they are Hershey Financial Advisors, a wealth management firm located at North Point Boulevard in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, leading people to make better financial decisions and empowering them to fulfill a vision beyond themselves. And we're really thankful for Hershey Financial Advisors being our season sponsor. Now, today we are going to talk to one of the people who is doing something in the classical schooling and broader educational movement that is such an encouragement to me. We're talking to Jeremy Tate, is it right to call you the founder and CEO of the Classical Learning Test, or what's your official title, Jeremy?
CEO and founder. Yep, that's
CEO
great.
And founder. I guessed right. So tell us a little bit about yourself. I don't know if you're really good at standardized testing and you thought, like my wife.
Oh, no.
My wife says, Ty found out he was good at school. He went one September and he never stopped going to school. So, so how did you end up getting involved in the classical movement and especially in the classical learning test?
Yeah. Thanks, Ty. A number of different places to potentially kind of start that story. I think just in terms of my own formation. And I was the son of a public school teacher. I hated school. I didn't read hardly anything until I became a believer at a Young Life camp, Lake Champion, 1999. Heard the gospel, and shortly after that, the area director gave me a copy of Mere Christianity, and like so many, went from that to Screwtape Letters and eventually to Orthodoxy in Chesterton and many others. So I think that was an early taste, but by 2008, I was in Annapolis, Maryland, doing youth ministry at Annapolis EP, which is a PCA church, actually. And I met students. We had students there. Some went to Rockbridge Academy.
Okay.
Some went to the local public. Some were homeschooled. Some went to a regular Christian school. But the Rockbridge students really stood out to me.
Okay.
And they took a level of ownership. I was impressed, and it made me curious about what was different about that school. I didn't know this was a thing at all.
So everybody, Rockbridge is our sister school down in Annapolis, Maryland, part of ACCS, the Association of Classical Christian Schools. And they're a long-time school, like Veritas Academy. But the lives of classical Christian students were kind of an apologetic that made you take notice.
Oh, and a very powerful one. It really made me wonder what this was. So that was kind of just a mental footnote. And then really, I didn't know, Ty, that there was this whole movement. Even in launching CLT, essentially, I had transitioned from the public school arena to the Catholic school arena. And I was excited to get in what you would call a faithfully Catholic school. A lot of Catholic schools are basically public, schools with the Mary statue, but there's a growing number of schools that are really doubling down on their identity and theology and re-embracing the tradition and Christ at the center. And this is one of these schools. I was really excited to get there, but I was really shocked when I got there to see the influence of the college board. This is a school my daughters go to now, Mount DeSales Academy. And this is how it showed up. So we had two sisters that were introducing two new classes. One was Intro to Philosophy, and one was Intro to Christian Apologetics. Sister Bridget was the main one, and she was so excited about this. And then hardly any kids signed up for the classes. And I was the college counselor, and I was part of talking to the students. Philosophy, these are the greatest questions any human can ever ask. What is the good life? What is human happiness? And they would say, well, Mr. Tate, it's not any AP points.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, what do you mean it's not any AP points? And they said, it will hurt even if I get an A, it's going to hurt my GPA. And I thought, this is crazy. We can't get our Catholic kids in Catonsville, Maryland to take philosophy or Christian apologetics because it's not AP. And I knew, so AP, of course, is the system of classes that used to be, at least for college credit, that the college board owns.
Okay.
And at the same time, Ty,
Now, hold on just a second.
Yeah.
And we're going to go deeper into this, but College Board, and I'm trying not to make the Darth Vader sound in the background, like.
Yeah.
But tell us, Jeremy, who is the College Board and how are they connected to standardized testing? Because that you and you've been neck deep in it. I've been knee deep in it for a long time. But who are the College Board, and why would I make that Darth Vader sound?
Yeah, Ty, man, and please make it loudly. Please do. The College Board has been around since 1900.
Mm-hmm.
And initially, this was a collection of Ivy League colleges that got together to standardize admissions testing for entrance as students were starting to look at various options between Yale and Princeton and Harvard and Dartmouth and all that. And the College Board initially was written, then they launched the SAT in 1926. So the College Board is the nonprofit, but it's a cash cow. It's not, the nonprofit doesn't mean anything, that owns the SAT, the PSAT, AccuPlacer, PSAT testing, AP testing, AP curriculum. They're a $1.2 billion empire, and they're radically left-wing organization. And what they do is they use AP, they use the PSAT, the SAT to push ideology. I met early in the CLT story with Robbie George. I believe Robbie George is maybe the most influential American intellectual.
Yeah.
And he said there's no organization that has done more to bring about the radical secularization of American education than the College Board.
Yeah.
And if you imagine as a thought experiment, imagine if for a moment, if the College Board, if every student and school in America knew that on the SAT, they're likely to encounter Aristotle, they're likely to encounter Dante, or maybe something from Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress. How different would the educational emphasis be in classrooms across the country? But what they've done instead is they have censored the entire Christian, Catholic, Western intellectual tradition. And instead, what are kids actually reading on the SAT? You can't make it up. College Board has admitted this. They're actually reading passages from Bernie Sanders on the SAT now. Wow. It is absolute garbage what they put in front of students.
He's almost as old as Aristotle, I think. Is that right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
But push one-sided, very ideological agenda.
So
they have tentacles at every school.
Yeah. So Jeremy, what you're telling me is that if I'm hearing you right, what you're saying is almost every Christian family in America is trying to help their sons and daughters kowtow intellectually to people that have the values that are opposite their family.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I mean, we had 1,500 years where Christians, we were academia. We invented the universities. We invented the school system.
But I mean, what have we done for them lately? It's like that Monty Python skit on the Romans, right? What have Christians done for us lately? Well, hospitals, universities, care for the poor. But what have you done for us last week? But how did Christians get? Why do Christian families put so much? Why is our culture so fascinated with standardized testing? And I know you're not advocating against all standardized testing, but why would Christian families do something like that? Why would they be part of schools that are just going to kowtow to AP and to the SATs and such?
Yeah, I mean, the SAT was kind of the standard, of course, for decades to get into every elite institution, in the country. And so I think that there's an understandable desire to do well for it, to prep well for it. And this is precisely why it has the power, we believe, of even shaping curriculum.
Yeah.
It's because at the end of the day, schools are going to be measured by how many kids did you get into Harvard or NYU or Columbia. And so it does have, it may not be as intense as some Asian countries where I think the standardized testing obsession is maybe even greater there, but it It is intense. It's probably dissipated a good amount with the test optional movement over the past several years. But, the Ivy Leagues just went back to requiring testing. The whole Florida system requires tests. So this is high stakes. You go to a place like Florida, you get a 96 on the CLT, you go to Florida State or University of Florida for free. So there's a lot of pressure to do well on these standardized tests.
Yeah.
For
sure. So tell us so your company, the Classical Learning Test is what's the right word? Fill in the blank. Is a blank for the SAT and the ACT. Is it competitor replacement? How would you fill in that blank?
That's right, Ty. Our 2040 goal, and we've been talking about this at CLT since almost the very beginning. We say it out loud now though externally. But the 2040 goal is to be number one over the SAT and ACT. That's the goal. So we want to be competitors. We want to compete by serving students and schools better, but really by putting students and schools in front of timeless, beautiful, the same kind of content that Veritas and Rockbridge and Logos and these great classical Christian schools are putting in front of students already.
Oh.
That's the goal. If this is where the most excellent education is happening at Veritas and Rockbridge and these kinds of schools, shouldn't they be setting the standard for everyone else rather than the failing public school system setting the standard?
Oh, somebody get me a pen. I'm going to write down January 1st, 2040. I'm going to call you, and I will be there. I will be there with champagne in hand.
Let's do it.
Yeah, that'd be great. So tell us, let's go a little deeper in. What is the Classical Learning Test, and why did you decide to create it? I guess that answer's been kind of around what we've been talking about, but what is it? How's it different? And then what gave you the idea that jumping in? So these are behemoths. You described, I used Darth Vader sounds, and you described them as an empire. And then you said, let's start a company to do battle with, let's join the rebellion. How did that, so what is it, and why did you decide to take this move to compete?
Yeah, I think, God has a sense of humor, and there's some irony in part of the origin story. And so SAT and ACT, as you may remember, they aligned with the Common Core standards in 2015 and 2016. And I was running an SAT prep company. I was already seeing the kind of garbage they were putting on the SAT and ACT. But then suddenly they aligned with Common Core. And the families I worked with, the school I was at, they were very upset. They said, we rejected the Common Core. And now both of the college entrance exams are Common Core aligned. And so I had an idea. Data for, I had kind of a business idea. And I thought, you know what? Obviously somebody's developing another test because everybody's upset that the only two college entrance exams are Common Core aligned. So I thought, I'm going to make the prep course for the new test, and I'm going to be first to market online. And when people search for it, I'll be the first one there, and it'll be an online test prep for the new test. So I just got to find out who's making the new test. Yeah. And then I'm like, this is weird. Nobody's doing it. And the one people I found who were doing it, I could tell very quickly they didn't know what they were doing at all.
Yeah. So basically you were going out to plant a flag to become the test-taking company, and you found out that no one had even reached the epiphany that we should have a new test.
Exactly. And everybody wanted it. So I was, talking to the colleges. I was a college counselor. So I'm talking to the colleges, places like Hillsdale, and they're not happy. The high schools aren't happy. The students aren't happy. The parents are happy. It's like everybody's using essentially what's just a product that nobody likes, right? And they're all using it because there's not any options. So I had the opportunity to talk with schools like Thomas Aquinas College and say, what if there was a college entrance exam? Thomas Aquinas College is a great book, no majors, deep dive into the Western intellectual tradition.
Yeah.
So what if there was an entrance exam that reflected this kind of education? Would that be of interest? They said, of course. Nothing like that exists. Of course, we would love that if there was something like that.
So how is it different? How's the CLT similar to the SAT and ACT? How is it different?
Yeah, the main difference is just going to be source material. And so in some ways, it's not that different or edgy or, creative what we thought of doing. we thought of, you know what, instead of having Bernie Sanders or passages about the processing of Greek yogurt, why don't we have something from Aristotle's Republic? Why don't we have something from Dante or C.S. Lewis or Flannery O'Connor in the modern world? So the main difference is just source material. But in order for the scores to mean anything at all to colleges, you have to have a concordance chart. And to have a concordance chart, you can't be measuring totally different things. So we're measuring the same things. We're measuring reading comprehension. We're measuring grammar and writing. We're measuring quantitative reasoning skills. We're measuring these things, but we're doing it with different source materials, but also with the full awareness that reading was never, ever meant to be disconnected from a tradition.
Yes.
And that's what modern education has done. And we want to reconnect it to the tradition that our language comes from.
Well, and it's also the CLT, it was on the forefront of doing the tests through electronic means, through the internet, so that like kids finish the SAT, and they might be changing this now, but kids finish the SAT and they used to have to wait, weeks or months to get their scores back. With the CLT, you're done with the test in like it's graded as well. Is that correct? There's a lot quicker version, right?
Very, very quick. Within about 10 days, there still is what you would call maybe a calibration process, making sure that the scores are fair. There's a little bit of a delay, but it's not like the month or 6 weeks that people have been used to waiting with the college board.
So why does a college board, and this is, I'm making some assumptions and I know some things, but why does a college board, like, how large is this CLT company? What's your bottom line at this point?
Yeah, we've got about 40 full-time staff here at CLT, and this year we're going to serve about 250,000 students. More than 200, at least 250,000, maybe as many as 300,000 students.
250,000 for size comparison. How does that compare with the SAT?
SAT is probably in the 3 to 5 million. If we're talking about the PSAT as well, but. Yeah, so we're still very small. I think, probably about 5 to 10% right now, the size of the SAT in terms of the number of students that we're serving. And
of course, I know some of the stories from back when you all were much, much smaller than you are now. Why does the college board hate you so much? Because they've done things that are just, to me, it seems nutty. I remember one year, and please, I don't want to defame them incorrectly because there's so much correct defaming that they deserve. But one year, I think you announced your in-school test date, and then they moved their test date on top of yours. Is my memory serving me well there?
Oh, very well. And not only that, Ty, we launched with a 2-hour test. They just changed to a 2-hour test. We went online, then they went online. And we've even had, and I love, people have sent us images saying, look what the college board put on the PSAT. We have seen now the Lord of the Rings and the Epic of Gilgamesh on different iterations of the PSAT.
Oh, my.
I think potentially that's CLT's influence.
Well, I think that's hilarious. Wow. But so I think, when parents think about this, how many colleges accept the CLT and kind of what's the kind of growth curve you're looking at right now?
Yeah, about 300 colleges accept the CLT right now. But what's really different at this moment is that about a year ago, the whole Florida system adopted. University of Florida, Florida State. I mean, these are two powerhouses alone within the top 25 of nationally ranked public universities.
You don't just mean you don't just mean in football, right? You mean like ranked.
That's right. And look, the University of Florida, they've got Ben Sass now as the president. They're introducing the new Hamilton Center for Classical and Civic Education. And so we're seeing this movement now impacting mainstream higher ed for the first time, which is so exciting. But look, you get a 96 on the CLT tie. You go to Florida State or the University of Florida, tuition free.
Wow.
And so that has dramatically increased the number of test takers.
Wow. Yeah. That's a very attractive element there. So how would you deal with people? Like sometimes I find myself and some other classical school people, we can have a sense of nostalgia, right? We want to we just want people to write essays and, we'll sit down and talk with them afterward and we'll know whether they're good students or not. How do you answer people who would like to get rid of kind of all standardized testing? When we hit COVID, the standardized testing world changed immediately, just like the rest of the world. And then, colleges just kind of said that the main thing that they've used for decision making, they tossed it over the side of the ship and just kept going forward, which makes you think maybe it's not that important for them to make decisions this way. So, some people are a little bit more skeptical of any or all standardized testing as a method. What would you say to folks like that?
Yeah, and we've had people say, you do know, that standardized testing is a product of the Industrial Revolution and where everything went wrong with education. And we understand all of that, absolutely. But we think the College Board is a toxic influence on American education and that there needs to be a competitor. And we, at this point, don't get to kind of choose the rules of the game, right? And so we are multiple choice standardized tests precisely so we can have a concordance chart that can be compared to an SAT or an ACT score. I think that's a big part of it for sure. Yeah. I think the other part though, Ty, is like, this is a snapshot. When I graduated high school in 2000. And back then, late 90s, it was almost like your SAT score was like tattooed on your forehead.
Yep.
You're just going to be a 950 for life or something. And so we overemphasize the test. And that's not good. And I think if it impacts the student's sense of who am I, that's not good at all.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we don't want to go to the other extreme. What is a standardized test? What is the CLT or the SAT or ACT? It's a helpful snapshot at a given moment in time in terms of some key academic areas.
Yes, and we do need to know those for colleges to make good choices, is what you're saying.
That's right. We don't want to overemphasize it or go crazy on it, but I think it can be a helpful snapshot. And one of the things to keep in mind here about the CLT that does make it a little different is that we actually brought back. The SAT got away from. There's no analogies on the SAT anymore, not one. Right? That used to be the very tool that they would use to this is thinking. Connecting ideas is thinking.
Yeah,
so this was a great tool. They got rid of it. And what it became was a Common Core aligned public school achievement test is what the new SAT is. It's what the ACT has been for a decade now. And what CLT did is we brought back analogies. We brought back logic questions on the math side. So in some ways, we're more like the SAT from the 1960s.
Well, and do you notice that students from classical schools do better on those sections than students in general?
Oh, no question. And now we have, a great deal of historical data. We've got a ton of public school students for the first time testing with us in Florida. So part of what the legislation did down there is it tied CLT not just to Bright Future scholarships, but also to graduation requirements.
Okay.
And what we're seeing is that students, similar demographics, everything could be the same, but the kids who are going to a classical charter school versus the kids going to the main district schools, kids going to classical charter school, they're doing better. They're doing substantially better.
So one of the exciting things that CLT is doing now is it's branching out into the realms of testing younger students. So you're now competing with tests like the Stanford tests, or I guess, the California aptitude test or the Iowa test of basic skills. So why did you kind of go from competing with the College Board to now starting a bunch of other battles in these other areas? Yeah,
Ty, I love to just share with you and your audience just this quick 2-minute story on how this happened. For years and years, we would present the CLT and heads of school like yourself would say, it's going to be really hard to back away from the College Board well, we love the idea. Can't you do lower grade instead? We don't really like what we're using on the lower grade, and parents don't really care if we switch up either.
Yeah.
But for years we said, no, we're a mission company. We want to change education, and you do that by changing the college entrance exam.
Yeah, but you're right about that. I mean, parents care about standardized testing so that they can get assurance from an objective party that their kids are learning, right? So
Yep.
they don't really. That's the thing they're after. Not no one cares if it's Iowa or Stanford or California or whatever. Okay, so you've got. And I think I might have cut in on your story there. So how did you make that decision again?
Yeah, so we had 3 years ago a head of school at a Catholic school in Texas, and she was insisting that I get into a Zoom meeting with her. She wants to show me something. I've got no idea what's coming. And she says, Jeremy, I want you to see this with your own eyes. She does a screen share, and we go to the website for NWEA Maps, one of the big players on the lower grade standardized testing scene.
Mm-hmm.
And on their own website, they're teaching 5-year-olds, Ty, 5-year-olds. They're recommending ways to make them allies. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And books like one of the recommendations is a book called The Drag Queen's Hips Go Swish, Swish, Swish. And it's a sing-along to the same melody as the wheels on the bus go round and round.
Oh, my.
To sing with your 5-year-old. And this head of school says, Jeremy, our archdiocese contracts with MAPS, but I am going to refuse to administer anything from this godless company to my students.
Yeah.
I need you to make something better.
Okay.
And we hung up the phone and we said, how do we say no? How do we possibly say no to that? And so from that moment on, we just said, we're going to do it. And so what we did is we brought together some of the leading classical schools, places like the Geneva School of Bern, to say, okay, what should third graders be reading? You tell us. We don't want to be the self-appointed experts here.
Probably
we
not.
Maximize. Yeah.
Probably not the hips on the drag queen go swish, swish, swish.
No, that's right. Not at all. Not at all. So we got 35 teachers, academic deans, administrators involved in these great discussions about what skill level, what is fourth grade reading like, should be like in a classical school. And so the process itself was beautiful in terms of really involving so many great schools, so many great leaders. And then we did our kind of field testing or beta testing last summer, and we administered it this time for the first year. And it's been the demand for it has been way north of what we even thought that it would be. And it's so cool. I mean, they're reading George MacDonald. They're reading children's poetry. Yeah. It's beautiful what we're able to put them in front of.
Yeah. Well, I'm still shocked there are Catholic schools in Texas. So, I mean, just imagine.
Not many.
Well, so the CLT and classical Christian schools are involved in, and I have this in scare quotes, a rebellion against the educational establishment. If I asked you, Jeremy, to put into words why other Christians should join this restoration of education, what would you say to those young parents that are out there, weighing out whether how they're going to invest their time, treasure, and talent to get their children in education? Why would you encourage parents to take a look at joining this movement?
Yeah, I love that, Ty. And I think going back to that testimony, that's what I saw 15 years ago, meeting Rockbridge students for the first time. I mean, the greatest argument for classical education is just meeting kids who went to your school. I mean, that is the greatest argument for it, for sure. They're being formed. And this is not to bash public school. There's some great families in the public school arena.
Yeah. Well,
but these students are really different, and it's incredible.
Yeah, I have the privilege at the end of every school year to spend some time with our seniors, and my goodness, it's just, it's kind of some of the best parts are where I'm driving them around and just listening to the conversations, which are both completely hilarious and have this
Mm.
depth of relationship and a common language from the books that they've read in a way that, you almost want to just turn the cell phone on and just to videotape the whole thing, but you're driving and that would be dangerous. So you're involved in part of this renaissance of classical Christian education amongst Roman Catholics. So it's interesting to me. Well, and I didn't know your story. How did you get from that PCA church into Roman Catholicism? I'm turning sideways now so you can confess your sins to me.
I'm deeply indebted, Ty, to the Reformed tradition. I think for Reformed theology, I went to Reformed Theological Seminary. I learned how to think well at Reformed Theological Seminary.
Well, we Reformed people are really good at thinking. In fact, the mission statement for our school at Veritas is cultivating loving, serving, thinking students. But one of my teachers mocks me sometimes because of my Presbyterianism, saying that what we're really after is just to create thinking students. So
yeah, but I was kind of read my way in through people like G.K. Chesterton into Catholicism when I was in seminary.
Okay.
Actually. And I converted in 2010 and have stayed great friends with a lot of evangelical Reformed Protestants. I think the beauty of the church, the tradition, and I've got great friends, Ty, that are Reformed, and that will also be willing to draw back what happened in 1517 to the beginning of the kind of the fabric of Western civilization,
mm-hmm.
which was Christendom. That was kind of the beginning of this dissolving or this shifting away. It took hundreds of years for us to get there in some ways. Yeah, so I think it's been about 14 years now, but I'm grateful for my formation in the Reformed tradition for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting. I do, we have old Catholic schools here in Lancaster and around the Northeast, and a lot of them were formed not to be distinctively so much Catholic as, like you said, a public school with mass.
Yeah.
And it's been so interesting to make friends with folks in the Catholic schooling movement, and then to say, isn't it a shame that we do more Latin at Veritas and read more Aquinas? So, but I'm thankful that I'm starting to see a kind of a resurgence of the classical movement amongst Roman Catholics. But why hasn't, you'd kind of think like, well, who's going to start studying Latin again? And the Presbyterians would not be first on the list. The Baptists would not be first on the list. Why hasn't the classical vision, why didn't it start in Catholicism? Or why has it been maybe a slower burn there?
It's a great question. Yeah. And I think many Catholics would argue potentially that it did. Okay. I think it depends when you would kind of date the movement.
You always argue that it started there, that everything started there. Like, come on.
Well, I think specifically in the launching of Thomas Aquinas College in 1973. So TAC it doesn't get more classical than Thomas Aquinas College. And then with that Mother of Divine Grace Catholic homeschooling as well. But this is all in the similar time frame, I think, of Doug going to Moscow and starting the Logos School. And it's interesting, right? Providentially, there was so much happening that was not coordinated at all, even between Catholics and Reformed people.
See, that's why that's where Presbyterians get you, because it was coordinated. It was coordinated.
Yeah.
It just wasn't coordinated.
Amen.
It wasn't coordinated by people.
Yeah.
Like
that is so well said. That is so well said.
Yeah. So what's your vision for the future of this restoration? And I know, like I tell people, all of this is still pretty small. I do have the feeling that we're getting a little bit of wind in our sails, and that's a good thing. But we're only probably 40 years into a 1,000-year project, so there are big tidal waves that can roll over us, and if we deserve much worse than we get. So, but let's paint a picture of where this movement could go, or what are the impacts that it could have on society, And then maybe also if you could paint some pictures about what do you think the biggest threats are to this movement headed forward?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest threats, tied without a doubt, is now classical has gotten so popular that schools can just kind of lean into it on the marketing side and attract families, but they might not really be doing anything that different.
Yep.
And I think that's an area of concern at all. And I hope that is where CLT is a differentiator and say, look, are you doing the college board thing? Are you doing CLT? So we hope we're one of many differentiators on that front. You know, I've been to classical schools that don't. I've toured so many schools. I've been to some that just don't, including Veritas, early CLT, and I was very impressed. 2016 or 17, I went up there and we met together. But I've also been to some where they seem a bit more watered down.
Yeah. So and this is especially true more of the West than the East, or maybe it just hasn't been true here in Pennsylvania as much. But there's the charter school movement as well. I have an uneasy relationship with the charter school movement because I think that the Christian part of classical Christian education is eminently central. I also think that, you know, I can envision times or places where, you know, I would be if I was in a particular place, that would be the school that might be the one that, at least until I could start a Christian school, it would be, you know, the one that would be attractive. So how do you surmise their place in this movement or on the outside of this movement? I mean, I really struggle sometimes with that. I have two pictures of Herman Bavinck in my office because if I get guilty, if I can't look at one of them, I turn away, but the other one is still there looking at me. And you know what Bavinck taught me was nostalgia is not something that you're called to. What you're called to do is to prepare students to take Christ out into every part of the world that actually exists. Because the modern world is not wicked. It's not something to be done away with. It's something for Christ to be brought into every area. And I mean, with the charter schooling movement, I think they're having some success. I think that I worry for them about, you know, state funding and what that would mean in the long run. And then I worry that they're get great teachers, but they have to shackle them not to talk about Jesus, which I think is pretty important. So what's your, and I know you probably sell a lot to charter schools, and, you know, I think that there are some areas of the country like, you know, New Mexico and Arizona, Colorado. I mean, I think there are more there might be more charter schools than marijuana in Colorado, honestly.
Well, I would make this kind of comparison, right? You know, I think everybody knows. You can just tell the difference between a Chick-fil-A and a Taco Bell, a Chick-fil-A and a McDonald's. There is something that fuels that entity, that company, that's greater than chicken and waffle fries, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think when you go to a lot of these charter schools, I visited one in the past year where, you know, I met the administration, we had lunch together, closed the doors, and they said, everything we do is to glorify God. You know, how can we pray right now for you and for CLT? And so I think working within the spheres that a lot of families are able to.
Yeah.
And I think with the conviction that excellence itself does glorify God.
Okay.
And so absolutely true. You're at a classical charter school, you know, they're not teaching scripture. They're not teaching the most important things.
Yeah.
But I think if you compare what they're doing to a regular district school, it's night and day.
Okay.
It's a completely different kind of education.
Okay. And you'd certainly have a lot wider interactions with those schools than I've had. So you've talked about a threat, and man, I see that things can get watered down when they get popular. But talk about what your hope is for the future of this movement, and then maybe just share how can we pray for you and pray for CLT and.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ty. You know, we've been incredibly blessed over the past 9 years, and you know we're one part of a very big movement. and one conversation with David Goodwin who's the head of ACCS. It was just so encouraging. He said that long term, it'd be hard to imagine how the classical Christian movement could really scale, so long as we're all deferring to the College Board as the measuring stick for academic success, and that CLT or something like CLT would need to exist for the movement to really, really keep growing. So I think that we would be true to who we set out to be, that we wouldn't compromise on the kinds of authors, the kinds of texts that we're putting in front of students. So that would be the prayer, that we would have the humility and the fortitude to stay true to mission.
Okay. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much. I really admire what you're doing. We here at Veritas, we have students every year that take the CLT. We're starting to get into using the CLT in the lower grades. Another great advantage to it is that it takes 2 hours, whereas some of the Stanford tests and things like that really knock out like the mornings for most of a week. So really thankful for the work that you're doing to help us to have a better and more connected, at least to Western history and literature, and the best things, the good, the true, and the beautiful in a standardized test. So thank you to you and all of the folks there at the CLT for all you're doing.
Ty, it's been a blessing to chat with you. Thanks for having me on.
You've been listening to Cultivate, the podcast of Veritas Academy, a preschool through 12th grade classical Christian school in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. If you'd like to learn more about Veritas, visit veritasacademy.com to discover the truth, beauty, and goodness of classical Christian education.